My name is Tim Montgomerie and welcome to another of our daily YouTube interviews for the Reaction website. I really do hope that you are enjoying them. And if you are enjoying them, please subscribe on YouTube and like the videos. That helps us rise up the algorithm so that more people can watch the videos. I'm really delighted today to be joined by Torsten Bell of the Resolution Foundation. And Torsten, thanks for finding the time to talk. And the main subject really wanted to address today was the well-briefed suggestion that the government is going to use a hike in national insurance contributions to pay for this thorny issue of long-term care. And you're not impressed with this proposal. Perhaps you could share with us why you're worried.
Well, I think we should start with the good news, which is it's good that we're getting serious about sorting out funding for social care. And that is very desirable because the system's a disaster for the people in it and for people that might need it in future. So it's good the government is wanting to put money in. And it's actually also good that they're taking seriously the debate about how we pay for it. So that's the good news. The bad news is that national insurance is a turkey of a way.
You're almost becoming a politician, Torsten.
Well, I'm not. I'm just a very reasonable person. So I want to be, lots of politicians wouldn't try and answer this question, as the last 20 years shows us. So I want to be positive about the fact that the government is trying to solve it. And if people thought it didn't need solving before COVID, you have to be have ignored all of the last 2 years to think that the social care system is fit for purpose, having lived through this pandemic. But raising national insurance as the way to do it is a very bad way of going about trying to raise the funds. In particular, in comparison to a straight increase in income tax, it's got a lot of big downsides. It's worse for the young. It's worse for people that rely on earnings rather than investment income to get through their lives, and it's worse for low earners. And in the weeds of the tax system, it also marginally increases the problem we have about our tax system encouraging people to be self-employed rather than employees, taking them out of the protection from employment rights. So that's 4 reasons at least why it's a bad idea versus income tax. There are some others, but as you can tell, I basically don't think this is the right way forward.
Why do you think they've gone for it? Because you were an advisor to Ed Miliband in the past. You have a sort of a political background, hence my cheeky reference a few minutes ago. But do you think it is basically that people don't really understand national insurance in a way they understand a lot of other taxes, and that polling perhaps done internally by the government, by the Conservative Party, has probably shown that this is the tax that people will be less offended by the prospect of it rising? Gordon Brown, of course, used national insurance to fund the NHS in the past as well for the similar reason. So it's not just the Tories that may be guilty of using this as their favoured self-tax.
No, absolutely. So yes, the history is of income tax rates coming down over time and national insurance rates creeping up, either in big lumps or in smaller increases. So yes, and that is because public opinion is more favourable in general towards national insurance rises than income tax. And I think that is to do with people associating it more with a way you contribute into a system rather than thinking of it purely as a tax. And that's partly because of the history of national insurance, because that was true to a degree back in before the dawn of time, but it's definitely not true now. Now national insurance is basically just working as another form of income tax, except that it's only paid on earnings and it's only paid by people below the state pension age. So it's a subset of an income tax. It's also paid by employers, obviously, if they increase the employer rate of national insurance as well as the employee rate. And that does create some significant distortions as well in our tax system. So yes, it's a more complicated way of doing it. You can hide at least half the increase, at least in the short term, if you pass it on through employer national insurance rather than employees. And the public does have a more positive attitude towards it than income tax. But the downsides are very large. And if I was the government, I think the politics of this are more complicated than a simple reading of a public survey will tell you. So yes, people, if they're asked to tick a box, will tick national insurance over income tax, but the government risks leaving itself very open to an attack from the Labour Party, which would be quite happy to have an excuse to have a policy after the last few months of criticism about not having them, that it is taxing the young and taxing low earners rather than taxing higher income households, whatever their age. So I don't think it is, and I think the public will basically broadly agree with that attack if the government goes ahead.
Yeah, I think there is a danger always for politicians that they look at what opinion polls appears to suggest now about a tax and don't perhaps factor in, and it's obviously hard to do it, but factor in the dynamic effects of an opposition and interest groups campaigning against what they propose.
And because politics, just like life, is complicated.
Absolutely. And of course, the Conservative Party at the last election suggested if they were going to cut anything, it would be national insurance. So there's a breach of an electoral promise there. There's a breach of fairness across the generations, as you suggested. There's a breach of fairness across income scales. And then there's just this general breach, I think, that, it's young people who've largely made the sacrifices, mostly willingly, I think, and completely happily, for an older generation in this period of COVID, for then to turn around to those same young people, those people still of working age, who a lot of indicators now suggest are some of the poorest people in the country when it comes to disposable income. To ask them to make another sacrifice does seem unreasonable. But my question to you, Torsten, is how would you fund it from the resolution? Because you're not really in this proposal asking the elderly to make a contribution. Perhaps they wouldn't have to fund it all, but it does seem not right that they aren't asked to make any contribution to something that they largely benefit from.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's lots of different ways of coming at how you fund this, and I don't think we should pretend any of them are easy or that the government's choices are straightforward. But if you want to do this from income, then doing it via income tax is by far the best way to do it. You can definitely raise the money. It raises slightly more than you raise from a national insurance rise, at least the transparent part of a national insurance rise. So the cash is there. And it would be fairer both generationally and across the income distribution. So that's the first thing, not least because you don't start paying income tax till you're earning over £12,000, whereas someone earning under 10,000 is paying national insurance. So if you want to do it via via income, then income tax is the way to go. You could also look at some of our badly needed reform of our wealth taxation system if you wanted to bring money in from other sources. If you want to do this via general taxation rather than doing it via charging on people's assets if they happen to get ill, which I think is right that the government is looking to socialise more of the costs of social care, so we don't have a situation where people, if they get really ill, are having their assets wiped out. I think that is reasonable, so long as we also put in a lot of extra cash so that more people, even if they don't have assets, actually get some social care. Because the biggest problem in the system, although the newspapers focus on people losing their house, which is understandable, in the system, the biggest problem is loads of people getting no social care at all who badly need it. And that is about general taxation. That's about general funding, not about a cap on the overall social care cost. So you should do it via income tax, or you should do it via elements of wealth taxation, for example, reforms to capital gains tax, some reforms to bits of inheritance tax, really sensible, obvious things we need to do to stop our pension tax system being so skewed towards higher income households. So there's lots of options. All of them are much better than national insurance. I'm a pragmatist, so I'm not saying it needs to, there's not just only one tax I would support to do this, because politicians need to make trade-offs, and there are big trade-offs between, an income tax system is much easier to raise the money and cheaper to raise the money than reforms to capital gains tax and some of the other wealth taxes I've mentioned. But once you're in the world of income taxes, there's no excuse for going for national insurance.
Well, I agreed with every word you said. I think we're agreeing on too much these days. But
that's very dangerous. I'm not sure who that's more dangerous for.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway. But final question. Let's see if I can get a final agreement out of you as well. I think we've been on various. Well, I think I've been on various Resolution Foundation panels in the past talking about universal credit and such like. I think you and I would also agree that the uplift should be maintained. But overall, it had its teething problems, but one of the dogs that hasn't barked really during this pandemic is universal credit has largely worked, hasn't it? It's been a system that's been relatively robust, and it seems to be a benefit reform that now, despite, let's not discuss the pain that we went through to get here, but it's now something we should retain, shouldn't it? And in a way, we now have one of the best most simple welfare systems in Europe because of the integration that universal credit delivered. Would you agree with that, or am I being a little? Is my conservatism showing through a little bit in that question?
No, we want your conservatism showing through a bit. Otherwise, life's going to be very boring. We need it to show through as much as your funky shirt. But I think the way to think about it is that the thing that has been an absolute godsend during this crisis for universal credit is the IT system. Okay, it's the having a system that could process digitally huge volumes of benefit claimants right at the beginning of the crisis. And the countries that didn't have that, I'm thinking of the United States for unemployment benefit, and I'm thinking about Spain actually as well, had big problems because they couldn't manage the inflow. And you didn't want people queuing outside Florida benefit offices to apply for their benefit payment. So I think universal credit, almost by accident, also became the digitalization of our welfare state. And that has turned out to be very good during this crisis. I think separately to that, universal credit has generally performed pretty well during this crisis, although a lot of that is down to the government increasing the generosity of it at the beginning of the crisis quite significantly. Probably poverty rates actually fell during the crisis because of what the government did with the £20 a week. And obviously that's why the government needs to continue that payment at the end of September, not to scrap it. And it's we can join that up to the social care conversation actually, because look, one way to think about this, about policy, isn't about the technocratic, have you got the exact right tax tweaks this time? It's like big picture, how does your policy fit with the trends that are happening in society? And so the problem with the national insurance rise is that the long-term trend is that older people have become relatively higher income compared to younger people as time has passed. And in particular, younger people who are stuck in lower earning jobs. Younger people tend to be more concentrated in lower earning jobs these days than they used to be. Plus, younger people, the long-term trend is that they accumulate lower assets than previous generations did. Now, policy can't remove all those things because there's some big structural trends like low interest rates driving them, but policy definitely shouldn't exacerbate them. And that is the problem with going for national insurance. And in a similar way with universal credit, after the last year, which has seen wealth go up a lot, but young people's incomes go down, the idea that cutting universal credit as we come out of this crisis, but not touching any wealth taxes is kind of just it's not looking at the country and understanding what's happening. So the job of policymakers isn't just to identify the problems, the public finances, how to solve social care, but to have answers that match the state of the nation and the change that's happening.
Oh my God, we are agreeing on far too much. And I think really, although you didn't quite say that universal credit had worked, you say digitalization had worked.
No, universal credit has had a good crisis.
It's worked. Say that, but I would almost say universal credit and the digitalization projects were almost the same thing. I don't think we would have done the digitalization if we hadn't done the integration that universal credit represents.
That's almost certainly true.
I think it just is. We're in a time when I think people are afraid of bold reforms, and governments can't do too many bold things at once. There's a capacity limit. But despite its problems, I think universal credit should be something that the Cameron era government, Ian Duncan Smith in particular, should be proud of. And I'm not going to let you respond to that, Torsten, but I'm going to thank you. I'm going to thank you incredibly very much for your time, and thank you all for watching. And can I invite you to go to the main Reaction website? We're doing a 3-month trial at the moment. All you need to do is leave us your email address, which you can delete later. And for that month, you get full access to all of our articles and features. Thank you, Torsten. Thank you very much, all of you. Until next time, goodbye.